legislature is back in the Committee of the Whole, preparing for today. Once again, Senators, we have completed and we have closed Chapter 1 on the revenues. We will be going to education. At this point, I will read the rules for this round into the record, and I will also make a couple comments, and then we'll bring in the education officials. So, colleagues, we have 2 rounds of questions with the panelists. Each senator is allowed 10 minutes for the first round, 5 minutes for the second round, excluding panel's responses. If you yield your time, that time is fully transferred to the recipient and cannot be reclaimed or reallocated. Once 2 rounds of questions are completed, the panelists will be excused. You have until the panels are dismissed to submit any floor amendments you wish to propose. Amendments submitted after dismissal will be considered out of order. Third round, amendments or comments. Third round is for speaking on the chapter or offering amendments. Each senator is allowed 5 minutes. Amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk at session@guamlegislature.gov. Amendments will be processed in the order they are received. Any replacement is considered a new submission, putting it into the back of the file, back of the line. To ensure accurate processing and timely distribution during this round, all floor amendments must be submitted using proper floor amendment form. Any amendment not submitted in the proper format will be returned. Amendments will be uploaded to the Google Drive. Bookmarks must be addressed before the end of the chapter. The requesting senator is responsible for ensuring it is brought up. Once the chapter is closed, the bookmark is retired, addressed or not. Appropriation increases. If you move to increase an appropriation, you must state the funding source and explain the impact on both the receiving department or agency and the department or agency being reduced. After the third round, I will declare the chapter complete. Sizus Masi for your cooperation. This morning, we will bring the education officials in, and there has been some discussion on the floor that there is going to be some sort of controversy with regard to the Department of Education's ability to operate within the ceiling that's been put in front of them and put into this bill. I will not allow Office of Finance and Budget to take the full brunt for this, and I'll explain this why. The administration consistently said during the adoption of revenues that they agree with the revenues. We are so close. We are basically a little $6.7 million different. So the fact, my colleagues, is that all the appropriations that have been made in this budget generally are in concurrence with the front office. If there is any entity that's going to come before us and say that they cannot accept this budget, then it will be incumbent upon both the administration, represented by their fiscal team, and OFB to reconcile this issue. If there was a gulf of difference between $50, $60, $100 million, I could understand putting it on the backs of OFB and our presentation. But that's simply not true. We know we disagree on one area. We disagree on the issue with regard to the $41 million that's contemplated in this budget for the rollback of the BPT across the board. The fact is that if those funding sources are not good for other things that were mentioned on this floor, then they should be equally not good for appropriation. So we have to live with the ceiling that's been adopted by both the administration and this legislature. With that, I will go into recess to bring in the Department of Education officials and get the party started. We are in recess. The legislature is back in session. Welcome to the Department of Education. So first I'm going to have the superintendent to introduce his team, and then we will swear them in. And the superintendent will have an opening statement, and then we will go to questions for the first round. Superintendent Eric Swanson, Doc, you are recognized at this time.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Team to my right, my Chief of Finance, Mr. Wade Paul, and Jordan Bukakoska is our Budget Officer. My Deputy for Accountability and Administration is Leah Nahalawa, and my facilities folks down at the end, Nick Cruz and Jimmy Pangolina. The documents that we provided to you, I'm going to read into the testimony, which pretty much covers
Doc,
what's
before
in
you
the
do
letter.
that, we're going to have you guys stand up and be sworn in.
I'm just task-oriented.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, you affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Mr. Chair, under oath, you may proceed.
You were provided two documents. The letter is the basic text that I'm going to read, but the reference to the balances and the figures are in the spreadsheet that's also provided so that you can have them as a reference. Senators of the 38th Guam Legislature, I provide my express comments to you today with concern regarding what we're hearing about the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget and what it contains regarding GDOE. Following information describes the cost increases GDOE is facing and the details of possible impacts of the proposed $266 million carryover budget. GDOE will be forced to make cuts to personnel in the district and that is already facing challenges with regard to staffing levels for teachers due to the national teacher shortage, as well as the Adequate Age Education Act and the government's responsibility to meet the requirements set forth in the collective bargaining agreements negotiated and signed by the whole government of Guam with regard to school aides, school administrative staff, school counselors and nurses, and working conditions for teachers. I also need to remind the body that the fiscal year 25 budget, inclusive of the supplemental $10 million totaling the same $266 million proposed this year, required extensive austerity measures that have jeopardized the department's operational capacity. The department over the past few years has greatly endeavored to finally come into compliance with the Adequate Education Act and Public Law 37-4 by greatly expanding the Facilities and Maintenance Division's staffing levels to increase facilities and maintenance capacity to respond to work orders, requests, and other emergent situations that can occur across now 39 school facilities and administrative buildings. We've been open about our plan to expand our facilities and maintenance regional teams to ensure that more of a responsive to reported problems that can be addressed as quickly as possible, and that they don't deteriorate into larger issues that require work beyond the capacity of our division. In addition to expanding F&M, the division GDOE has endeavored to ensure that all teachers and other school-based vacancies have been filled. GDOE has started this school year with one of the smallest teacher vacancy numbers it has seen in many years. We're currently tracking 54 teacher vacancies that still need to be filled and multiple school-based administrative vacancies due to staff retirements and resignations. The proposed $266 million budget will jeopardize GDOE's ability to fill these critical teacher and support staff positions, greatly impacting the quality of the education and support received by our students. I must also recognize that the GGRF contribution level will be increasing to 33.85%. This constitutes roughly a $4.7 million increase to the baseline personnel costs for the department. In order to reach the proposed $266 million budget, GDOE will have to make the following cuts to our FY26 budget request of $306 million. $10 million, all unfulfilled vacancies and proposed new positions, CBA or otherwise, excluding facilities and maintenance, already filled positions. $7.7 million to all student teaching positions. GDOE is currently funding one substitute per school. The $7.7 million would have increased that to 4 substitutes per school.
A little bit closer to you.
Sure. $245,000 for teacher prep period coverage arrangements that increase the number of uncovered classes. Those are for when we don't have a certified teacher, we pay teachers to come in and cover classes that are not in their schedule. $2 million local use federally funded school staff. That's unallowable for grant reimbursement, leading to unmanned school gates and hallways and increased workload and remaining locally funded employees. $354,000 for supplemental funds to support ISA, resulting in reduced services. That would be fewer sports, coaches, and equipment. $60,000 for GDOE fleet maintenance, $101,000 all continuing education professional development opportunities required by law, as well as for administrative staff. These are for professional organizations and membership and training. A $30,000 GDOE will no longer seek accreditation services for middle and elementary schools. A $5,000 cut just for postage. A $359,000 case management system for special education and non-special education students with disabilities. $7,000 school ratio maintenance services. Those are radio maintenance services. $2,000 public awareness printing services from the Student Support Division. $3.2 million for the network switches replacement installed in 2012. They have a life expectancy of 5 years. This would disable our entire data system. $1.2 million of the Salape Principat funds for school self-help and supply funds. $518,000 for all division supplies and materials. $170,000 in the IT division equipment upgrades. $250,000 for expected workers' compensation claims. $1,000 for drug testing for non-higher testing, and $3.4 million for utility costs and proposed levels. The proposed cuts constitute $29.6 million in total costs from the proposed level, but we must also address the following required increases in mandatory spending to maintain basic operations separate from the proposed $306 million budget request submitted to the legislature. $7.7 million restoring the school lunch reimbursement fund to its correct level of $12.5 million. $1.4 million increasing custodial services contract costs that align with full fiscal year costs. $195,000 increase for pest control contracts to align with fiscal year costs and increase several services to ensure compliance with public health requirements. And $4.4 million increasing food service management contracts to align with full fiscal year cost. The increase constitutes $15.9 million increase to correct the budget proposal authorized. The total actual cost reflecting the above amendments and technical corrections to formulas in the original submission would bring the actual needs-based budget's request for GDOE to a total of $317.4 million, with a general fund appropriation of $291.4 million. Assuming all special fund appropriations remain at the same FY25 levels, GDOE would need to cut a cumulative $50.9 million in general fund costs. The total value of the above cuts and corrections is a reduction of only $30.9 million, meaning that further $20 million of cuts must be made elsewhere in the budget. This would mean that the department would have to conduct a $20 million reduction in force impacting filled positions, which would finally bring GDOE's budget request in alignment with the proposed $266.4 million proposed funding level in the FY2026 budget bill. Given the above numbers, the department finds that the proposed cuts will severely impact the department's ability to provide educational services. Passing the budget as is will be disastrous for the department and Guam as a whole. The impacts of the proposed budget would require layoffs within the department en masse, reduced work weeks or cut hours, and reduced services. Given the entirety of the central administration services of the department, GDOE's FY26 request represents just roughly 10% of the entire personnel cost of the department at $23.5 million. There is no scenario in which the department can address this substantial shortfall without laying off school employees across the board. The bulk of the impact would have to be imposed on our schools. The proposed budget would lead to an untenable situation. It calls for increased class sizes. It would mean even fewer school aides and administrative support staff supervising and supporting our school children. It would force the department to embark on a wholesale school closures, impacting at least another 10 communities, if not more, which itself would necessitate increasing funding to expand school capacities across the district to enable them to accommodate increased school populations, alongside increases to other agencies who provide necessary services to our students to accommodate the rearrangement of the entire school district. I sincerely hope that the senators can consider all of this as you deliberate the FY26 budget.
Mr. Chair. Mr.
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
We were following along with what was handed to us. However, a lot of the information that he was reading off is not in this particular one that was given to us. Maybe we've got a shorter version or something, but could we get a copy of what Mr. Swanson was reading so we can
Sure.
just got to,
Yes, we can do. Of
Sure.
course.
It'll be provided. So now you see why I have to have the administration down here. Because the EBR is only $10 million different from what we had given them in the OFB budget. The EBR is $276 million. Ours is $266 million. So with the presentation that the Department of Education just came down with, we're all holding the bag here. And so we're going to have BBMR down here to find out where this revenue gulf can be made up when we've adopted revenues that they said they were already good with in terms of the numbers that we had. We were only 6.7 million off in terms of our total revenues in terms of between the administration and the legislature. So we will do this as a team. So I understand that today, in this morning at least session, Lester Carlson and Ed Byrne are predisposed on some sort of conference with some sort of issue with education, but they will be here in this afternoon. So we will have you to have the same questions for them as you will have for Office of Finance and Budget, simply because there's a $10 million difference, and that is nowhere near what has been presented to us this morning. Senator Speaker Frank Blas, you are recognized for your open line of questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, when BBMR does annual DOA comes in, we will have that opportunity to ask the same questions.
Absolutely, Speaker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Swanson and the GDOE, thank you very much for being here. Dr. Swanson, for being here this morning. Dr. Swanson, you represented that you were looking somewhere near the area of about $300 million for GDOE. Can you describe for me, or can you tell us, what were your discussions with the executive branch when the budget was being proposed as they proposed it to us?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
With regard to the discussions, I mean, you just said that you need close to $317 million, but the administration in their submission to us was a different figure, was substantially lower. Can you describe, what was your discussion with the executive branch when putting together your budget?
The discussion with the executive branch is initially the budget that we presented to this body is what we presented to them. And there wasn't any further discussion with us in the development of their proposal.
So they did recognize that you wanted 317, but yet they had submitted a substantially lower budget request to this body.
That's correct.
Mr. Speaker, if I could make a correction. Our budget initially requirement was 370 million, but what we submitted to the legislature was 306.
Okay.
306 million.
So 306, 317, I just wanted to know how we got from, let's say, 306 to what was submitted in the executive budget report as the figure, from the administration. Did you?
My department did not have any discussions with the executive branch regarding. I know the superintendent did let the executive branch know what our budget request was, 306 million, but there were no discussions further.
So other than your presentation, there was no discussion as to how we were going to depart from that, or they didn't come back to you and said, this is what we're going to present, and we expect you to live with that?
They didn't give us any feedback regarding that. No, there was no discussion.
There was never a question in that, okay. What was your budget last year? For this year?
Current year, sir, is 266 million. 256 with a 10 million supplement.
So 256 with a $10 million supplement.
That's correct.
What was your ask for this year? Not for next year, fiscal year.
I think fiscal year was 303 million.
So you asked last year for this year's budget, for this year's operations.
For this year's, for FY25, we were seeking 303 million.
So you sought 303, you got 256 plus 10 million.
Yes, sir.
266.
Yes,
okay. Do you have any lapses right now?
We may have a lapse, and I'd like to explain our lapses.
No, first of all, so you do have lapse?
We're expecting to have a lapse, yes, Senator.
In what amount?
I'm sorry?
How much?
We're estimating possibly between 11 and 15 million.
11 and 15 million dollars.
And we're working those figures right now.
Okay. You were going to further explain?
Yeah, there are lapses. Lapses have occurred with GDOE over the years. Some of them are purposeful lapses, which is what I was explaining to another group this morning. Healthy Futures Fund hasn't been used, limited gaming fund, I'm sorry, hasn't been used in about 10 years. We keep accumulating. That's about 350,000 a year that's appropriated to us. We cannot fix facilities such as Southern High School's sports field with only 350,000. So that's purposely been accumulated over the years so that we can get to the 2.5 to 3 million amount that we can apply to a sports facility like Southern High School's sports fields, which are not in use currently. So that's a purposeful lapse. We also have problems with our procurement. A good example of that is the food services, food commodities. It's been in protest the entire time. We've been trying to get it out. And that's going to be part of our lapse right now, because we set aside 1.4 million for that. But because the contract was never executed, that's a lapse that we're going to have. The third thing is we are short procurement personnel to handle this volume of work, this volume of money that comes into the department, whether it's federal or local. Right now, I have 2 buyer 2s in our procurement section. One of those is just hired and not even on board yet. And we are trying to get these procurements out with the complicated process in the government of Guam. With just an administrative officer, a buyer supervisor, and a buyer 2, we cannot handle the volume of funds that DOE has to deal with, both in federal dollars and local dollars. So that's part of our problem, and that causes lapses. The last thing I'd like to mention is there's a conservative approach to how we use the money that's provided to us. We're always juggling. We plan to use money for things like the superintendent would like to get band equipment into all of our schools. And that's $1 million. But we had to cancel that because of other requirements. So the money in the end is not always going to where we had originally planned it to go. Say again? Which restarts the process. Right, which restarts the procurement process from the start. Now, with the lapses, there are things we would like to use it for. We just went through a lawsuit with elevators. To fix all our elevators is going to be $2.5 to $5 million. The Southern High School sports field, we'd like to use the lapse for that. The band equipment, the change order for FBLG, we haven't identified where that funding is going to come from because we're constantly juggling the limited amount of funds that we get. So I hope I'm able to explain, to answer your question, Senator. That is how we arrive at 11 to 15 million estimated lapse this year.
Okay, you said something very interesting. You said that what you wanted to do was you wanted these lapses to build over the years so that you can have enough money to be able to make the needed repairs?
Well, in the case of the limited gaming fund, that is what we've been doing with, over the years, that money hasn't been spent since 2012, I believe, and we've been allowed to lapse it over the years. But it's only a $350,000 appropriation. We can go out and buy volleyball nets, sports equipment. It's supposed to be geared towards sports equipment. In the meantime, though, we have problems like Southern High School where the kids can't practice or have home games because their field is not serviceable for them. It's not safe. So over the years, we've accumulated that to 2-point-some million. When I came on board back in August, that's one of my goals is to use, and I've mentioned this to the EFSC, to use that pot of money to pay for the big projects, like Southern Sportsville, Southern High School Sportsville. So yes, we have accumulated over the years, but with the intent to use it for bigger projects rather than just using $350,000 a year to buy sports equipment.
And this plan has been shared to you by your predecessor?
No.
You just finished saying you just got in August of last year. That fund hasn't been used since 2012.
I don't know why the fund has not been used, but I know what it accumulated to. And when I came on board, I tasked an individual to go down to Southern and let's try to get that project moving. Because I realized how much money was in that pot. But again, the appropriation is for sports facilities.
You know, when you have a 12 or 11 to $15 million anticipated lapse, okay, and with the funding that you're asking for, you gotta prioritize what is it you said you're going to have to lose out with what you want to be able to do. I mean, there are many things that we can desire or we want to be able to do, but then now we're at a point where we need to be able to address some of those areas. This is the first time in all the years that I've heard from GDOE that there was this accumulation, knowingly, obviously, and that this was still supposed to be used otherwise. That's almost deceitful. And I'm not going to blame you, Mr. Paul, nor can I blame any one of you up there, because I don't think I remember seeing any of you up there in 2012.
Yes, Senator, I think every single one of us is brand new.
Yeah, and that's what, I mean, it's hard pressed for me to, okay, for me to, I don't want to say, be very critical or be critical with that. It's just that right now, again, how do we squeeze the nickel out of the 2 pennies we have to deal with? And one of those ways is we have about $11 million worth of pennies that may be available by the end of the fiscal year, and how can we be able to use that? So that's the point that I was getting at with regard. I appreciate, your desire to be able to use it the way you want to use it, Mr. Paul. But I didn't hear that in the presentation as was presented here. Okay, which is why I would appreciate, like as the good Senator Tidy had asked for, a rundown as to what you were saying. Okay.
Yes, Senator. Speaker.
Mr. Guerrero, in the determination of the budget as proposed versus the budget that was given by the executive branch, and how did we determine that they can live, or I'm trying to word it in a way that I don't want you to try to justify the executive branch budget submission, but obviously you had used that as a basis and a baseline for putting together the budget as proposed in the bill. So can you explain what the process you had to go through?
Yes, Senator, and like we did for all the other departments and agencies, we utilized the FY25 budget appropriation as our starting point moving forward. We took into consideration what the departments were granted in the current fiscal year, which I believe in the case of GDOE, they were given a $20 million supplemental, and $10 million supplemental, and then, of course, taking current conditions of what the departments are experiencing. I just want to applaud and appreciate the fact that GDOE is taking upon themselves to try to set aside X amount of dollars to fund future projects which they cannot fund today, simply because of the lack of the necessary funds. But you also have to remember that when we appropriate funds in a fiscal year, It's to cover obligations for that fiscal year. And it is not meant to utilize to fund future projects, because hopefully when we get to that point, there'll be adequate funds to cover the cost of those projects whenever that time comes. So the other thing also we took into consideration is, based on the EFSC report that they submit every month, which I attend, I try to attend most of them. Within that report, there's a report that's called the Financial Status Designation Report, which shows basically the financial status of the department. And as of the June 30th report, and like Mr. Paul Wade mentioned, the department is anticipating a lapse. The lapse that's reported on that report, or reflected in that report, is about $11.8 million. So we take that into account. Bear in mind, there's only 3 months left in the fiscal year. And if 9 months have already lapsed and we're still lapsing 11 million, and I take the ratio of expenditures, I mean, it tells me, but by the end of the year, they're going to lapse in the millions. So taking that into account, taking again, where we want them to be in FY26, and I don't have an open checking account where I can just give them all the money in the world, even though I would love to. We decided that we'll give them basically the current FY25 appropriation level, which includes the 10 million supplemental. I just also want to note that if you look in the EBR, the governor set aside 20 million for GDOE. But in doing so, this is the first time that the executive budget put GDOE as part of the reserve category, which before previous budgets, they're always in the executive branch. When you lump all the agencies in the reserve, if you look in the executive budget, there is no specific amount for each department or category. It's lumped. So the way we configure how to allocate, basically, what's being allocated for each of the departments within that category, we take a certain percentage of the current year appropriation and use that percentage to figure out what 26 would be, based on the amount that's reflected in the category. It is not an arbitrary number that we came out with. It's a number that is solidified by previous appropriations that were given to the agencies. And we thought that was the most fairest way to do it. So again, taking all those things into consideration, that's how we basically base the final ceiling for GDOE. I don't believe we shortchanged them anything. I don't believe that based on their current expenditure trend, I think it would be adequate to fund the agencies based on their current expenditure trend. And like I said, if they're trying to save this money for future projects, again, I applaud them, because if they can't get the funding to fund these projects, like the Southern High and putting an elevator in every school, which the Southern High, for the last 20 years, I think has been a problem. But the elevator thing, that's something new. This is the first I'm hearing it. But good, I think it's great. But that's going to cost in the millions, if anything. And if we can't get them that, like some senator says, give them the full amount today so they can get it done, that's a challenge in itself. And that's not even part of the conversation when we're putting this budget together. So again, to answer your question, Senator, that's how we derived and how we came with the GDOE ceiling for FY26.
Senator, may I just try to comment on one of the things? I just want to provide clarification. While I agree very much with the methodology and how OFB goes about trying to determine appropriate funding levels, I completely agree. When you have departments that are just consistently lapsing money, whether you have to look at why they're lapsing the money. While on one hand of it, maybe OFB is looking at it from, look, GODE, we're giving them so much money and they're not spending it. They just don't really need that full amount. We can continue to maintain. That's one way to look at it. But you have to look at it in terms of what was provided to you here. This is a sheet, basically our Schedule F of the budget. It breaks down exactly what are the priorities that we're spending the funds on. The challenge that the department has been facing for years now is the capacity to be able to handle it, like what Deputy Paul is saying. You know, of course, there are, like you mentioned, intentional, you know, and of course, I understand the, you know, the speaker's consternation of what do you mean intentional lapses, but when we're looking at everything outside of that, the intentional lapse of $350,000, while still $350,000 is a lot for impact for our students, we're looking at the lapses that are in tens of millions of dollars that are really more of the inability of the department to be able to get these monies spent. It's not that we don't need the money. Everybody knows that, you know, we need the money. The problem is, where is the department able to spend it on, and are they able to finally get those spendings completed? Are they converted into purchase orders so that the funds are properly locked in? And that's the challenge. That's where the lapses come from. Not necessarily just because the department is not spending the money, and that's why, you know, the need is so far greater than what the proposal is putting forth.
I appreciate that, and you brought up some issues, and I thank you for identifying a lot of your concern and a lot of the reasons why you're not able to reach or use maximize use of the money is there are internal issues that you have, okay? And procurement is just one of them. We have to take it from a standpoint that this is, while it's perennial. And we have not seen any attempt to be able to fix that. I think that right now you're still trying to go through the weeds to figure out where the hell the root is. But when I look at your budget and I see your operations, and mind you, I know your operations, okay? I can see that there's a disconnect not just in the communication, but then there are things that occur there that are more personality driven than professional driven. Okay? I don't want to get into that. It's a whole other discussion that I think that you guys need to resolve, but it needs to be resolved in that fashion. It's not that in this body, it's not the intent of this body not to give you the money that you need, okay? It's just that sometimes we give you the money that you need and you spend it on what you want, neglecting your needs. And it's very frustrating from our end to see this. You're one of the more visible entities in this government, and so we can see that it's happening. That said, is that with the funding that you intend or that you're going to be getting here, I think the challenge is basically to try to maximize, again, with the amounts that you have, with the priorities that you need, that you spell out first. I appreciate this, but I've seen this thing year after year, and sometimes I look at it and it's the same. Some of these issues, again, like I said, are perennial, and there's no performance. I don't see any performance measure in it other than it's spending, and that's what needs to be changed in this whole process. And I've lost my train of thought here. Oh, Dr. Swanson, what is your student population now?
We don't have final figures yet, but we're in the neighborhood of 23,500.
At your peak time, what was your population?
At our peak,
Yes.
it was over 30,000 pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID was about 30,000?
Correct.
What is your dollar to student ratio at 30,000?
At 30,000, I don't have the budget information from that period. It's not
Okay.
something I looked at. Currently,
What is it currently?
based on last year's end of the school year enrollment, we're at $1,100 per capita.
11?
From our appropriation, the 266, that worked out to a little bit over $1,100 per capita.
Okay. Is this 23,500 figure, student population inclusive of charter school?
It's strictly our own enrollment. It excludes charter schools.
Okay. How many campuses do you have currently?
Currently,
Right now?
39.
That are occupied.
We have 38 that are occupied. One is under renovation. That's FBLG.
Okay,
We're not occupying that facility at the moment.
okay. And are all your schools fully occupied?
We still have capacity,
Okay,
if that's the question you're getting
Yeah.
to. And we went through a process last year. That's why we've closed 2 campuses. We're going to do that again this year because we can get greater efficiency.
let's just take an example, okay? One of your larger schools, George Washington. What is your capacity of George Washington?
GW's capacity can exceed 2,000.
What is your capacity now at GW? What is your population now?
Population now was right at 1,400, but we're still enrolling students, so I won't have an official number until September.
Okay, so you have a capacity of, again, 2,300, how many?
They've housed upwards of 2,500 on that campus before.
Okay. So your campus of, let's just take it 2,300. So you have a capacity of 2,300, but you have a current population of
14.
14. Okay, do you have any schools right now at, 80% capacity? 80 to 100% capacity?
We should have, at the elementary and middle school level, most of the schools at that level. The high school, we have more capacity.
Okay. Part of your austerity measures, looking at, and you said it earlier, I just wanted to get it, taking a look at whether or not you're maximizing your ability in the schools.
Last year, we did an extensive study of all of our capacities. That's why we went forward with closing 2 campuses. I'm expecting to go back through that process again because once I have more current information on enrollment, I anticipate us being down anywhere from 500 to 800 students from where we closed last school year. But that's across all grade levels.
Okay, what was your, pre-COVID, what was your number of campuses that you had?
Number of campuses,
Yeah.
41.
41. I'll wait in my second round because then I'll finish my questioning about that. Is how are we maximizing our campuses so that we can maximize the amounts that we're getting, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, can you assume the chair, please?
Senator Duane, you recognize?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Mr. Guerrero, please reiterate the process of the reserve fund versus a standalone budget as prepared by the governor's office.
Senator, just for clarification, are you talking about the 5% or are you talking about all the agencies?
I'm talking about lumping all the agencies together and putting DOE into the reserve as opposed to having them have their own budget request. What is the effect of that?
If you want me to list all the agencies that are part of that reserve, I can.
Please do.
Okay, and this is based now on the executive budget request. Those agencies include the legislature, the Office of Finance and Budget, Unified Judiciary, Public Defender Service Corporation, the Mayor's Council of Guam, Office of Public Accountability, Office of the Attorney General, Guam Visitors Bureau, Guam Election Commission, Guam Ancestral Land Commission, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, Guam Department of Education, Guam Academy Charter Schools, Council, University of Guam, Guam Community College, and Guam Commission for Education Certification.
Wow, that's a lot of big agencies. So what was the total appropriation for the reserve in the EBR?
That amount is $396,788,378 out of the general fund. For the special fund, it's $52,949,192, and for federal match, it's $11,839,565 to total $461,577,135.
$460 million for all of those entities, which means even if we were going to reach your 306, minus 306 from that and tell me what's left.
Approximately $155 million, Senator.
155 million left once again for all the other agencies. Go ahead and read them out again.
Again, it's for the Guam Legislature, Office of Finance and Budget, Unified Judiciary, Public Defender Service Corporation, Mayor's Council of Guam, Office of Public Accountability, Office of the Attorney General, Guam Visitors Bureau, the Guam Election Commission, the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, Guam Department of Education, Guam Academy Charter Schools, Council, University of Guam, Guam Community College, and the Guam Commission for Law Education, Guam Commission for Educator Certification.
So, Steve, we heard a lot about, during the discussion on revenues, we heard a lot about scapegoating, about passing the buck, about, transfer authority, everything else. But yet this year, Department of Education was commingled in the reserve. Do you consider that somewhat of a passing the buck instead of a straight alone appropriation for education?
Sir, not so much using your choice of words, but yes, this is the first time we are categorizing GDOE under the reserve category in the BEPR.
So, Mr. Swanson, that's probably why they never followed up and consulted with you on your budget proposal, because they didn't have to. All they had to do was just stuff it in to the reserve and say, legislature, figure it out. This is exactly what happened to the Mayor's Council, Mr. Speaker. Why we came up with a number of $9,800,000 for the Mayor's Council, because that's all that would fit. So now we are here with our request at $266 million, and we heard that the reserve categories are intentional reserves and different reserves. I had heard nothing about that reserve containing budgeted vacancies. What are the budgeted vacancies currently for GDOE tracking?
Senator, based on their FY2026 budget submission, the total number of vacancies reflected in the request is 285 positions.
What is that total in terms of revenue?
Well, in terms of appropriation, it amounts to about $13.2 million.
So, Mr. Wade, is it your testimony then that the intentional 11 million doesn't include your budgeted vacancies?
Say that again, Senator, I'm sorry, or Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Paul, you said that your lapses concur or exist of all kinds of different categories, some of them intentional lapses. Are those intentional lapses of $11 million, does it include this $14 million of budgeted vacancies currently?
No, it does not.
So, Senator, may I just add a little bit of context to it? So, the process, of course, I'm not sure to what extent all the senators are aware. There is a budget process within the department, of course, where once the appropriation has been set, the budget or GDO, the department has to bring before the board a spend plan to try to meet that appropriation. So, of course, with our request last year at 306 containing all of the different asks, when the appropriation came down as 256, of course, with 10 million afterwards, of course, the department had to then make cuts to those figures of the 303 last year. So in order to do that, essentially all non-collective bargaining agreement positions all vacancies were cut, but we were directed essentially to look for lapses where it could be found to fund CBA positions, collective bargaining agreement, as well as teacher vacancies. So really, when we're looking at whether there's a lapse for budgeted, it's hard to say because really we're working with two different numbers at that point. We're talking about what was requested and what was passed. Of course, we have to figure out what we're going to cut during the spend plan process. And then, of course, whether or not those vacancies were cut or not is determined at the spend plan process. So really, at this point, there weren't, if truly any budgeted vacancies. What the understanding was when the budget or the spend plan was decided was that we would try to fill as much of the CBA and teaching as possible if we could find the funds for it. The difference now, of course, is we have plenty of the lapses, so why didn't we fill those positions? The reason why is because the lapses are coming from the inability to spend it. So really, like I mentioned, I'm going to try not to keep on coming back to this document that was handed out, but really, it's a lot of the funds that are lapsed are coming from these different contracts that are failing to get through, and this is like the speaker mentioned, there are internal challenges that we have to try to get rectified to try and be able to accomplish all of that spending where we won't have a lapse. Maybe there might be minor lapses here and there for people who retire, and then, of course, we rehire new people who are at lower levels, lower grades and lower steps, but that will be much smaller in terms of a lapse compared to what it is now.
But listen to yourself. We just showed you that you got $14 million currently in budgeted vacancies lapses. No, let me finish. And you got $11 million of intentional lapsing. The math on that is $25 million. And so the truth here is that you're laying everything at the foot of procurement, of recruitment, of what internal bureaucracy does. But the fact is, right now you're lapsing a grand total of $25 million.
Yes, Senator. I don't want to say that the entire $11 million lapse is intentional. I used the limited gaming fund as an example of one of our lapses.
So, Paul, give me a list of your intentional. I don't want to take it on your verbiage. What is a list of your intentional lapses?
Well, that's essentially the only intentional one. But then we have procurement issues, and that's an example I gave you about the commodities contract, which is 1.4 million. That was a problem with the contract being protested the entire time we were trying to get it out. So that money is available, but that wasn't intentional. Yes, we try to use lapse money to cover payroll costs. It's, again, we go back to we are juggling funds from one account to the other. last year's, you asked about the FY24 lapse. Most of that went to pay for utilities because we weren't budgeted sufficiently to fund utilities, so the lapse covered a lot of the utility costs.
So Wade, what I'm hearing here is you have procurement issues, so it means that if you have procurement issues and you have the appropriation authority, but you can't procure and you can't buy, then if you had a budget at this same level, you would still have that money next year if you're unable to procure what you were trying to procure this year.
So I think that's wherein lies the part of the ask for increased funds. We need the funds to be able to fulfill the contractual obligations of the collective bargaining agreement. You know, we're not going to jeopardize educational services in order to, you know, fill these administrative roles is sort of the thought process behind focusing on CBA and focusing on teacher. You know, of course, ideally, right, is if we were able to secure within our budget, we're going to be able to hire and make sure that we're going to hire the additional staff, administrative services staff, to be able to get the procurements done, then that will eliminate the likelihood of lapses.
Yeah, but hang on. I get, so you're saying you don't have the staffing to do procurement, but you're not doing procurement that is not certified funds available for what you're trying to buy, right?
Absolutely. So of course, you know, like we mentioned, you know, our asks are laid out within the contractual section of this sheet. You know, what we're having issues with is, you know, like what they said there are some items that may come up, like emergency issues, like with a lawsuit that, you know, requires us to spend money on other things. But outside of that, you know, within the actual budget request, what we're looking to spend on are these line items. And the lapses coming from not being able to complete those, that's where that lapses is coming from, and that's where, you know.
But what I'm trying to tell you is if you're trying to buy stuff and you're budgeted for stuff, the stuff money should still be in the current request. You're boiling it down to a staffing issue when you're got $14 million of budgeted vacancies. How do you have a staffing issue?
So that's where I'm trying to clarify, Senator, is I'm not sure what budgeted vacancies they're referring to. Even if they existed at some point, the vacancies, you know, we don't fill vacancies unless we can get, you know, make sure that the funds are actually there. The lapses that we're tracking in terms of how we track our money is, you know, we've been moving money out of personnel to pay for utilities. We've been moving money out of contracts to pay for utilities, kind of situation. You know, what is submitted in terms of the Schedule F, you know, to align with the appropriation, it has to change based on the operational needs of the department. But, you know, there are limitations to that. So that's where.
The priority, Senator, has been to try to fill, so we get a vacancy at procurement, for example. We get a vacancy at procurement, we try to use that funding to fill the CBA requirements and the requirements down at the schools. So it's not like we're purposely, we don't have enough money to meet the CBA requirements, meet all the school requirements for personnel, and meet the requirements to run the Department of Education. And that's, so if you're wondering how we're using the lapse, that's how we use the lapse. Either that or we cover down on utilities.
So then you should be telling us you don't have a lapse then. Because if you've moved in an object category from personnel to utilities, then that shouldn't show up. You should have a journal voucher that basically says we moved this from this and that no longer exists, yet you still continue to demonstrate intentional and non-intentional lapses. It's just confusing, and that's all I'm saying. It's just straight up confusing because you keep talking about the bargaining agreement and to meet the bargaining agreement, yet they're probably going to come after you because you're still lapsing in your personnel.
Well, going back to the limited gaming fund, the law restricts us from using that for anything other than sports facilities.
But Senator, I think this is exactly what, you know, Deputy Paul has brought up a couple of times, within our department for us to try to figure out how can we rectify it, but also to the other agencies who work with us on the EFSC, which is, why is there a gap between what you're reporting, what OFB is reporting to the legislature, what BBMR is reporting to the governor, what the government is seeing on the G5 system in terms of, our grants. There is a disconnect between what we are tracking and what we're reporting from our financial management system and what is showing up on other agencies' reportings. There is a gap there, and what do we need to do to fix that gap? That's something we'd have to explore, of course. The challenge, of course, there is in order for us to hunker down and we have to sit down and reconcile between us and BBMR, us and OFB, us and the federal government is we're going to need to increase the administrative staffing, which again comes to the point of, well, if the funds are increasing to fill these school positions, when are you going to be able to, in terms of us, not the legislature, of course, when are you, GDOE, going to be able to get the funds to be able to start hiring the additional administrative services positions that you need to achieve these additional tasks? And, I don't know where that kind of funding source would come from.
Mr. Superintendent, I have a problem with this. Because it sounds to me then there's a backwards thinking here, because if that's what you need in terms of procurement and in terms of getting everything else going forward, that should be your priority. If you're already lapsing in personnel, you can't say you have a money problem for hiring those individuals administratively. And if the administrative staff is the one that's going to get you out of the pickle and get you into where your reporting requirements, your reconciliation, everything else, that's why we need BBMR here. Superintendent, is your allotment schedule on time? Are you getting it regularly?
Yeah, would you repeat that, please?
Is your allotment releases on time and regular?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Paul, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm disgusted that you've allowed that limited gaming fund to accumulate. That was not the design. I am the author of that law. And I would tell you that the intention was to help the kids directly with equipment and supplies. If you got one school, and it's unfortunate, that should be a CapEx project. If you got one school that is having difficulty with regard to their facilities, you don't punish all the other kids because they could have equipment and supplies and everything that they need in the other schools that have operating gyms, operating field, and I'm going to ask you on the record right now, are you going to go in and correct that immediately?
Senator, the last appropriation was the only part I was involved with. So,
I'm asking you, you know what's in that account.
I know what's
are you
in that
going to
account.
correct that?
I know what's in that account. Now, we can go out and the idea came up during one of the EFSC meetings to split that money across all the schools. But then we're not solving the big problems. We're not fixing the gym floor at GW.
Mr. Paul, I'm going to remind you, that was not designed by law to accumulate resources. If you have capital improvement requirements for the schools, that is a different issue. Do not punish the kids in terms of those who need volleyball nets, who need basketballs, who need baseballs, who need to have the fields cut, who might need uniforms. What's the amount in that account again, you said?
It's accumulated to 2.4 million.
I want the parents and everybody else listening out there right now that always say it's the legislature or somebody else, that our kids don't have sports equipment, that our kids don't have maintenance for their fields, which would be involved in that too, that our kids don't have basketballs, that our kids don't have this and that for their gyms. That's just on its face wrong, because that account was created for that. It was not created to create a massive fund to go in and fix one project, one gym, one school. That is a structural issue associated with capital improvement projects. So I expect you to go back and work with the team and start distributing that money to those schools that have working gyms, that have working fields, that have working everything else, so that the kids can have the money and supplies they need to play in the basketball courts, in the fields, and all the other sports facilities in the operating schools.
Senator, I've not heard any complaints about a shortage of sports equipment in...
Is that right?
I have not.
Okay,
But,
we're going to find out. I think the
that's
people
the
of Guam are
intent
listening
of-
to this.
of
Parents of
the-
children will tell you different, I believe.
Now that we know that that's the intent of the law, we will use it for that. But I will come back to the legislature and ask that for our major projects, we need capital improvement funds to fix problems like at Southern High School.
That is absolutely appropriate. That's absolutely appropriate. There's no question about that. And CapEx, like you know, because you're a finance guy, are not done with cash.
Right.
CapEx are done by a request, a corpus request that goes out, and it was done under former administration. Glenn Leon Guerrero was responsible for that from Public Works. Along with Simon Sanchez, he accumulated an entire cadre, you might look in your files, of what all different schools needed for CapEx, because at the time, it was contemplated to go to market with both projects at a total of $150 million. We're not there anymore, but believe me, other administrations have worked with DOE on CapEx requirements for all of the schools to do it in a one-shot deal.
All right, Senator.
Don't hold on to that money, Wade. That's a disservice to those kids. Since 2012, that's unconscionable. I know that 1 year is on your head, but I expect you to fix it now that you know what the law is for.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson, with the number of schools that you're reporting now, with the 2 closures and the like, you're reporting teaching vacancies, and I'm probably, maybe this is part of it, at one of the lowest in history. Is that because you've been able to cross-level teachers into the other schools?
That's in part because we cross-level teachers and the vacancy slots that they were put against no longer exist because we're moving closer and closer to the negotiated class size. And also in part to our teacher preparation program that we've got partnerships and cohorts, and also working with the university, we're getting more certified teachers in. And we also simplified the process for retaining retired teachers. So it's a combination of several different efforts.
How about other faculty other than teaching and learning?
We're short candidates in administration to be assistant principals. We are still recruiting for, I think, 2 counselors and 3 nurses because of retirements. Those are new losses this year. So, but generally speaking, our other professional positions, we're in better shape than we are for teachers.
But the faculty from those closed schools, along with the teachers, were cross-leveled as well?
They were cross-leveled. All but 1 or 2 went to another assignment, and then the 1 or 2 retired. So they were on the verge of doing that anyway. But they've all been reassigned.
Superintendent, have you recalled the $14 million from the mold mitigation project?
We have not.
So once again, Mr. Speaker, we sit here with the bait and switch. Everybody's jumping up and down, hair on fire. I'm not, because I don't have hair, but I'm still on fire. $14 million. We're talking about the educational needs of our kids and the needs of 2.5 years now. No mold mitigation. Education department got duped, saying, give that to us. We'll do it for you. And there it sits. 11 million lapses, 14 million lapses, $14 million not recalled. I don't know, sir. I'd take that money tomorrow. I wish you would initiate that. That will help in the entire process. I can't wait till BBMR gets here because they got some splaining to do. This is exactly why OFB had a challenge with this budget this year, is because of DOE being placed in the reserve category. And that's why, yes, we're 10 million off. I understand our education chair has some prime amendments to proffer to make up some of these areas. But I'm going to tell you guys right now, I know what your ask is. I know what you're saying your need is. I'm not questioning that. What I'm questioning is year after year after year after year, you come here and you tell us this, yet every single time we show you that for whatever reason internally, you're not able to get her done. On staff, on the list goes on. Intentional holdbacks. It just doesn't add up, and we don't need this folly in our community of we're not funding you. I'll handle the rest of that in the second round. Suswansi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Duanes. Senator Matalta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, DOE, for being with us today. We were just across the hall on April 30th, about 108 days ago, and especially after listening to the questions from the chairman. And in my perspective, that it's not really a cash problem you guys face, it's quite frankly a priorities problem. You have to make some hard decisions. And I know that folks in here might think that they might need to be the training wheels for you to make a hard decision. But you guys are tasked with having to do that. No one else. Classroom priorities, I know you guys know this, must be your focus. And delivery of key education programs has to be your commitment. Your credibility, quite frankly, is at stake. Now, I heard the start of this testimony, Mr. Swanson. Adults really do administer our schools. And some of the things that in this list, quite frankly, I just don't see how they get to the classroom. And I say that right now in 2025 because we just can't do business as usual. And I've been listening all over the talk radio, read the newspapers, see your hearings. And I got to say that you've seen what is happening across the country and here. And we have to collectively come to the realization that this federal dollar reliance has to be refocused on getting what? Back to the classroom. 23,500 students. With this budget, that's about $12,007 a student. Okay? Your charter school counterparts with school choice, this government pays $7,500. Mr. Chair, I think that's going to pop to $7,800. And my understanding is they're doing pretty darn skippy. And that's a good thing. But we have to do a better job with that amount of money that you're given. And I was just before we started today looking at the public K through 12 spending per students, and we're pretty much higher than at least 3 states. I think New Mexico, Utah, Oklahoma. I think Idaho is the lowest at $9,390 per student. I'm not saying that those are apples and oranges. They don't have the same things that we have in Guam. You can easily drive across an interstate line to get something. We have an ocean that we have to kind of traverse to get products and services and the like to support the operations of the government. And I just wanted to ask, because I'm just I was listening to the chair. We were talking about vacancies, and I think in the public, I was just going back to my notes and to the committee report, and we were asking about vacancies. Help me understand. Help the community understand. It seems like as we ebb and flow, what's going on with vacancies? If we can, maybe Jordan.
For which section of the department?
Let's talk about teachers. How about that?
Teachers specifically?
Yes, please.
So I think maybe perhaps, Doc, you have better numbers on that. I believe it's 54. That's what.
Currently, we have vacancy for 54 teachers that have not been filled.
is there a challenge that, are we not just producing enough teachers?
In short, no.
Because I was at the UOG graduation, I was very encouraged. I think you had your whole team there. It's just not fast enough. Is there, when I say that, it's just this kind of the same thing that we're trying with our law enforcement folks. Do we need to retool maybe the ability for us to get teachers hired faster in DOE, do you think? Or is there a policy that we need to change?
I wonder, Senator, you know, of course, we work directly, like Dr. Swanson said, we have a teacher. I'm so sorry. We work directly with the University of Guam. We have, it's an initial teacher certification program. And, you know, we do work directly with them to try and really recruit these teachers. Or, well, sorry, the IDCA is, sorry, I apologize, let me backtrack.
No worries.
The IDCA is us certifying our teachers who come on who are uncertified to get them on board. But we do work directly with the university to try and recruit students who are getting their teaching credentials at the university separate from us. The challenge, of course, is, you know, we're not the only recruiters in town, right? We've lost previously students, you know, graduating students to the mainland. We've lost them to Dodea. We've, you know, the same, you know, common things we've heard year after year. I think the challenge, you know, for us is, one, right, of course, is we do need to fix internal issues that, you know, teachers, young teachers, they're not blind. They see what's happening within the department. They see the challenges the department is facing. They see the, you know, maybe their parents or their aunties and uncles were teachers, and they see the struggles and frustration they've gone through, and they say, "Ooh, maybe I'm not too interested. I would love to teach, but I'm not too sure about at GDOE. Maybe I go somewhere else." The other side of it is, you know, a compensation thing. You know, of course, we were able to somehow manage to finally get teachers a long-deserved pay raise, you know, a few years ago. But, you know, of course, as time goes on, you know, other jurisdictions around the nation are also increasing their teachers' pay to try and fight for the same pool. So, you know, I don't know what exact item it is we need to work on, but I know for a fact that if we can at least improve the conditions that, you know, we're, you know, able to provide all these services, we're able to make sure the basic things, the grass is getting cut on time, that the custodial services are provided properly, that all of these different contracts are able to get in place, that would be, I think, a big benefit that a lot of teachers would look at and say, I'm enjoying my time teaching at GDOE much more.
Yeah, and I don't argue that, but I would strongly recommend when we think about, and I've said this, I told you all, I've talked to most agencies, this is not going to be about, always going to be about cash or money. It's going to have to be about policy. I know that your policy board sets policy for a lot of different things, but there's that next step that in case you need that, that's what we're here for. And we're here talking about the bottom line, which is the dollars now, right? And when we go back to the hearing, there was insurance and retirement. What has changed in 108 days now? I mean, I know that the health insurance has come down.
1%.
Yeah, and so so when we're thinking about this big dollar amount now, I'm wondering, was there an appreciation of what's been happening over the last 108 days?
Yes, so, you know, of course, this is something that we really wanted to touch on back in March when we had the budget hearing itself. You know, we tried really, really hard to maintain something as close as possible to our request last year. We didn't want to show that we're, you know, doing massive increases and everything, but, you know, as, you know, we kind of are what Dr. Swanson kind of mentioned in his testimony, you know, there were some adjustments to like special funds that we were doing to try to meet that level, which have to be corrected. And that's why, you know, the ask is really, it's 317 would have been the actual needs-based ask. And, you know, for us to, you know, go in now and try and say this specific thing is not really about the classroom, you know, I think we can provide the answers to every single one of these items and say this is absolutely needed. In terms of, you know, what has really happened for the past 180 days, it really has just been the challenge to achieve the goals in the prior year.
Oh, no, and that's fair, Jordan. But I think for me that I think we have in the budget, there's leases and all these things. I mean, I think that in the reality that we face today, I mean, and I'll just say, because I think I said it before, I mean, you could save some money by perhaps Southern High School's got some vacancies over there. And I tell you that the school population isn't the same when they first opened. I mean, you own that facility. We keep spending lease money to take care of a building that does not belong to us. And I tell you, if you put adults near a bunch more students, and I'm talking, you guys are just administering schools, and I'm sure, Mr. Swanson, from your experience, you've been to different school districts where these district offices are inside schools. Kids behave differently. They really do. And so I'm hoping that over the next year, and this budget's going to do its thing. It's going to go through, and these things are going to be some levels of realities, but we need to rethink how we deliver it from a different perspective. You have facilities. You're leasing. You need to, just like Big Gov Guam, we need to start to go to places that belong to us. And one important facility really is Southern High School. You're going to say, well, yes, it's not central and all those things, but you don't need to be central to deliver the administration of schools. You just got to be able to have a commitment to get in there, retool it. You're going to help Southern High School more than you know, but with your simple presence. But look at other school facilities. 'Cause I mean, I don't think we're going to be putting any more kids in there at this point. But, think about the use of these facilities in a different way. That cost can be saved. And then when you guys come back here next year, the chairman's going to be like, okay, what'd you guys do in the last year to maybe help reduce some costs? Because we all know it's going to teachers. We're trying to put more money into the classrooms. But can you at least make a commitment today that you guys are going to try to go for the next year, and let's try to find ways to reduce the cost of delivery of schools? And I'm not talking about in our classrooms, I'm talking about the administration of schools. And I know that I'm looking at blank faces because right now they're like, I don't have an appetite. Well, I think this legislature, we are going to be asking you to do something different. I'm pleading with you because we're all fighting for resources for all our agencies. And we're trying to build a school or rehab schools that have really been neglected for years. And we need to find other mechanisms. So I'm asking you, and I know, Mr. Chair, I'll probably have more detailed questions in round two, but at least in this first round, when you think about that cost of $12,007 per student, we see charter schools being successfully driven at 78. Do we have to put it down to 8,000 or 9,000 to really get the resources where they need to be, or do we need to just retool how we deliver schools? I don't know, but we need to start to look at it hard. Mr. Chair, that's all I have for the first round. Thank you so much.
Sidus Masi, Senator Gumatato. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair, Biba Betnes, Fiesta Friday to the people of Guam, and just want to take a moment of the people's time to wish my daughter Samantha Marley Barnett and my son Chase Tatum Barnett a happy birthday. They share the same birthday, many years apart. And also want to wish my boy a good day at school over at FB Leon Guerrero, where he is trying out for soccer. And it's been pretty rough. He was texting me last night, Dad, it was hard. Coach made us do 45 push-ups. So I said, how many did you do? He said, I did the same as everyone else, 45. A lot of running and equipment, too. So I'm very grateful for that. And I kind of wanted to start there because I don't know if you guys are catching this, but I noticed when we were talking about big corporate payday via the 0.5% BPT rollback, it was, like lips like sugar. But we get our public schools in here, and all of a sudden, my colleagues call them Sour Patch Kids. Let me just first start by saying I definitely support the Guam Department of Education. I voted no on the last budget bill because it shorted GDOE $40 million. I fought like hell to get you guys more money, but unfortunately the narrative is very similar to what we're hearing this morning, and that narrative is that GDOE has all this money, is a big mountain of money, they can't spend the money, they don't need no more money. And part of why I ran was because you hear it every election. Oh, the kids, education first. Yet we continually shortchange our public school students, our public school facilities. And I don't know, it kind of seems like a good idea to listen. We have a great team here at GDOE, right? We've had some struggles in the past, and I really think that you guys are moving forward meaningfully. We've made, significant improvements with facilities in terms of, 2 years ago, not a single school could pass a public health inspection. And via the support and oversight of the legislature and the executive branch, all of us really working together to keep that pressure on and to provide that support, whether it was through funding or, keeping tabs on the execution of these plans, I believe that we kind of took the public school system and planted it right down in the middle of the public conversation, right? So a lot of the mindset now is we have in many ways changed the morale of the department, where we now have schools who are passing inspections, where there's a lot of morale to raise the inspection scores, and the following year you got schools competing with each other. There's just a lot of pride in the department. And my train of thought, and I'm sure my colleagues, was to kind of take care of that aspect of it, because you can't expect kids to show up to a school that's dilapidated, to show up to a school that's falling down around their ears due to the decades of neglect, and expect them to, get straight A's, to do well in academics. So the thought was always, let's take care of the setting and let you guys worry about the academics. So I just wanted to start by saying that. And then also, just to touch a little bit on the limited gaming fund, and I thank the chair. It's a great law, Public Law 3260. And I believe he did say he authored this law, but I actually have it popped up on the screen here, and what it reads: up to 1/3 of the available balance of this fund shall go to the Mayor's Council of Guam for the repair and construction of village recreational facilities, including community centers. Up to 1/3 of the available balance of the Department of Parks and Recreation for the repair and construction of its facilities. And up to 1/3 of the available balance to the Guam Department of Education for the repair and construction of its sports facilities. So, Mr. Wade Paul, I think you're absolutely following the intent of the law. And so I advise you to keep doing that. And let's get these sports facilities repaired. At Southern High, or in other areas where we don't have sports facilities, because with the double sessions, let me just put this on the record. One of the challenges is that, for example, Simon Sanchez sports teams, they're not being allowed to use the facilities at JFK, so they're having to go into the FAFA of the island trying to find a facility, a mayor who will let them use the lights, and that's just not right? So anything we could do to improve the sports facilities. And while we're on the subject of sports, I know that part of the proposed cuts here in your list is sports, right? Interscholastic sports. Can you kind of explain the impact of that? And then I'll just go down the line with a lot of the other stuff you said. $354,000 will be cut. This is supplemental funds to support the interscholastic sports, resulting in reduced services, fewer sports coaches, equipment, et cetera. So I thought it was a little bit ironic that we're talking about this law and talking about sports equipment, yet the narrative is let's cut you guys off at the knees, and then you come back and you tell us how you cut more.
Yeah, that particular portion of our budget request was to cover what we're currently doing is taking out of the general fund to pay for the shortfall in the interscholastic coaches, the athletic directors. So with the budget cut, we'll continue, the proposed budget, we'll continue to do that. We'll have to ball, and so I was trying to align that so that this body knows we are not appropriately funded at the level, at the current level, which has been the level for several years, to fulfill the requirements of the interscholastic sports programs. And so we were trying to get, rather than stealing from Peter to pay Paul, that portion of the budget to cover it. Some of that was, we did increase some of the coaches, after-school coaches pay, but that was all federally funded. That was through our consolidated grant program.
Yeah, because I already received concerns from coaches about delayed payments, so it's very troubling to see that that is one of the things that is going to be impacted by this. It's a shortchanging of the public school system. You know, over the last 3 fiscal years, we've been able to incrementally increase the amount of funds that we're providing to the Guam Department of Education, because I believe you guys know what you need to deliver the best results in the classroom, and we have to be supportive. And it's given me a headache, this narrative that you've got all this money and we don't need to give you any more money. I've got an amendment in here to appropriate $10 million to you guys to cover a lot of the shortfalls that you're addressing in this document. And I'm of the understanding that you were told to prepare budget cuts in anticipation of a budget of $275 million. And I don't know if there was a typo, we're pointing fingers and blaming the governor, but we've got to blame ourselves. As you know, we had a committee that came out with this budget and it wasn't 275, it was 266 million, which is status quo, which is concerning because we have people in here who ran on making improvements to public education. But now we're hearing this narrative that it's very clear there's no appetite in this body to give you more funds to deliver better results to the classroom. And the reason that is because we've chosen to prioritize a reduction in the business privilege tax. And so now every conversation about every dollar that we want to use to deliver critical services to the people of Guam, you hear the tone. It's not very supportive. It's not very supportive. And I want, if you guys could address this idea that, and good morning to my charter school families too, this idea that, oh, the charter schools, they do it for $7,800 and you guys, it's costing you $12,000. I know the answer, but maybe you can explain why it costs more to educate a child in the public school system.
It's a good question, Senator. First of all, this is the system that serves everybody. There's an interview that's in our literature in education that's talking with the owners of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and they're really proud of their blueberries they put in their ice cream. And they said, well, what do they do when the blueberries aren't up to your standard? Well, I said, we don't buy them. We get different blueberries. We get the blueberries that come through the door. And that is 61% of our kids that are qualify for SNAP. That's why we have the free and reduced free lunch and breakfast program that we do, is because of the poverty level. Students who have the opportunity to go to charter schools have an opportunity just in mobility. Mom and dad can take them to school. There's a big difference in socioeconomic situations. I'm glad that we have charter schools that work better for some kids because everybody learns differently. So it's a good thing. But when we put all the services into what we do, we have a huge public health mission with a licensed and a certified nurse in every school. The school districts in the states that spend more money than we do on kids don't do that.
If I could just interrupt Mr. Swanson, congratulations on that, because that's something we've been able to improve on over the last few years, is to get a nurse out to all of the public schools and to support them with pay incentives. So thank you. Continue, please.
You know, I'm thrilled that we have that, but we have a very large public health mission that in other communities is shared by other agencies and funded separately from public education. So there's that part of it. And then we have the challenges of maintaining 50 and more year-old facilities. When you lease from another facility to have a school, the owner has to come in and fix it. Well, we're the owners. So there's a number of challenges there. And then we have, with that, the differences in employment requirements. Charter schools have the opportunity and the legal opportunity of having their teachers, none of them be certified. Just meeting the 14-point law is a really nice idea, But I can't find any place in the history of the law that has not been violated at some level because of the actual mechanics of getting all of it delivered. But we keep working toward that law. The accreditation requirements are different, so that we have those operational considerations. Just the wages and benefits side of it. And you see the change in the retirement benefit piece, that's a $4.1 million increase in operating costs because our employees are all government of Guam employees that have the same benefits as the other agencies. So there's an operational cost that's higher. And, you know, those are the kinds of consideration why it costs more.
And you have mandates to meet, and meeting those mandates costs money.
That one that was in the miscellaneous section of last year's bill to do an audit of our whole system, which is in process. Well, we kept it under $500,000 so that we didn't have to wait for the AG to approve it. But that audit's underway right now. We're going to have another visit in September. So unfunded mandates, but they're everywhere in education, not just on Guam.
Yeah, and you know, as we talk about looking in the mirror and figuring out how to lower costs, is it true that you guys have implemented a hiring freeze and also travel bans to kind of address some of the shortfalls and impending federal cuts?
Yeah, we've restricted hiring, and the hiring that we're doing is prioritizes people who deliver services directly to kids at the building level. Teachers, aides, clerical staff, administrators, not central office. And then travel restrictions are, but everybody needs to understand in this body that none of our travel is ever funded with local dollars. It's funded through our federal grants program. We don't spend Guam dollars for anything like that. But that's, that we still restrict the amount because when you take people out of the classroom, then you're losing instructional time because we don't have enough certified substitutes in many cases to cover classes. So we're very, very cautious about who's in school, when they're in school. If we're going to have people travel, it needs to be when the kids are not in session.
So we've implemented a hiring freeze. We've implemented a travel ban using local funds. We're currently being audited for best management practices, and hope is that this audit will show the Guam Department of Education where we can make meaningful cost savings and where we can apply these recommendations. And so a lot of the rhetoric from my colleagues about, how are you going to cut costs? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? We're trying to do it. We're trying to do it.
Yes, we are. And one of my objectives, and it's in the scope of work for the audit, is to look for potential ways to save and looking specifically at organizational structure and lines of authority to make those kinds of changes so that we can be more efficient and more effective in our work.
And let's talk about the maintenance issues, right? We're talking decades of neglect. Privatization didn't work. Now we're looking at shoring up the DOE facilities and maintenance team because that's what worked. When I went to school, we had that in-house. You had electricians, you had plumbers, you had carpenters. They would respond at a school if there was a situation. And as the Republican mindset kind of took over the government of Guam, it was privatize, 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 which didn't lead to a savings, which didn't lead to facilities that were maintained. And so I'm very glad we're kind of able to course correct with the support of the colleagues here in the legislature and make that determination, that very sensible determination that you need to have a robust facilities and maintenance team to address a lot of the maintenance issues that we faced and are facing.
Well, that's accurate. The effort that's gone forward, since I got here, welcome to Guam. The typhoon just left town, and now you get to fix it. And then the challenges that we've had, and we've made a huge progress. But yeah, increasing the maintenance side of it, and I would say for the record here and anywhere else, to have the maintenance and custodial staff be part of the crew, be part of the school system, to be the familiar face that kids see on campus every day, that is critical. There's been, the ownership of the school and the setting and the quality of life that goes on there is greatly enhanced by the folks who make lunch and serve it to the kids, by the people who clean the building, and also remind kids, I got to come clean up that restroom and you're not going to do this. But at the same time, be the kids engaged with humans that are adults that they know and trust. From school bus, our school bus drivers are wonderful, even though they don't work for our department, because they know the kids. They know if they're going to have a good day from the time they get on the bus in the morning till they deliver them at night. And they are also the source that we have to give us an alert when we know someone's going to have a hard time. So it's important, and I see the other side of it, wanting to privatize because you're reducing the cost of personnel, and because when we bring people on as a custodian to run a building, they're going to get wages and benefits and retirement benefits and medical benefits, and then we're doing the math on all of that. So I understand the difficulty in balancing those forces, but in terms of my preference and experience over a lifetime, literally, is that the more people that kids encounter who belong to that school community, that's their extra parents. They might as well be aunts and uncles and godparents. And that piece is critically important, and I'd like to see us continue to grow it, because the ownership that's happening now, when we went from 20 maintenance workers to 90, walk around the campuses, they all opened on time, and they're all standing taller than they were a year ago.
Yeah, it's a short-term sacrifice for long-term benefit. And that's why it's very concerning, and that's been the conversation, maintenance, yet we've delivered a budget that severely impacts negatively your ability to maintain your facilities. One of the proposed cuts here, Salapi Principat funds, and the principals, they're a little grouchy this morning, seeing that this is on the chopping block because you're having to decide where to cut, because we're shortchanging you in favor of delivering that BPT discount.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to yield my time to Senator Barnett.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, my senator friend from Tamuning, Sidus Masi, for the time. Yeah, so this Salapi Principat funds, maybe Mr. Jimmy can kind of talk about this. These are funds that the principals are able to access at the school level to do things like, paint, do little spot repairs, and so this is on the chopping block. How's that going to impact our schools and their ability, Mr. Pangilinan, or whoever can answer, to respond to these things like, oh, we need to go to Home Depot and grab this or grab that, where it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of let's deploy the F&M team out to the school?
So Salapi Principat, it's existed since, ever since the law has been in place, but of course, successive years, it hasn't really been funded. The law stipulates $50 per student, and this is essentially self-help funds for the schools. So, this comes from, of course, a time when the schools were, the large complaint was, really the responsiveness of the central department to be able to respond to all of the maintenance needs, all of the other needs within the schools. So, the purpose of the Salapi Principat is to really, empower the principals to be able to, this small thing that doesn't require a maintenance worker, I can go and buy a light bulb and, change the light bulb myself. Similar things like that. Maybe they won't have, this kind of came up one time, I'm not sure if the super members, we got a little bit of a ding asking the teachers to change the filters in the air conditioners, right? Maybe not something like that requires them, especially a lot of our older Manamco teachers, retired teachers coming in, we're not gonna ask them to get on the ladder But, you know, things where it's a small thing. You know, I can buy paint, a small little pint of paint, and I can just paint my door just to cover up a scratch. Things like that that are small in nature, that wouldn't rise to, you know, a large procurement. These are the kinds of things that we would love to be able to have our principals. You know, it also reduces the inefficiency of the system. That's one less requisition item that has to go through the procurement process at the procurement office. It goes through the procurement process, I believe, but it's a small purchase, so it's a lot simpler of a purchase. And so that's the major help of these things. It would really provide a big opportunity to increase efficiency and to allow our schools to really make a difference on their level.
Senator Barnett, I'd like to say a few things about that also. The Salapay Principat was, when we submitted our Schedule F based on the appropriation last year, was cut out in order for our spending plan to match what we were appropriated. But thank you for that supplemental, because that is what we use to fund Jimmy's maintenance requirements. I just heard one of our GDOE cafeterias, an issue I'm working with this week. They were calling to ask if they can use their PTO fund to buy cleaning supplies for their cafeteria. And over my dead body, are they going to do that? Because that's not what the PTO fund was intended for, and it's our responsibility as the department to fund that. So Salapay Principat would cover something like cleaning supplies for our cafeterias, for our GDOE cafeterias. We're figuring out a way out of the 1.4 commodities lapse to use some of that money now to fund these, to provide funding to those GDOE-run cafeterias to cover things like cleaning supplies or just their paper plates and utensils that the kids use. But the cleaning supplies is an example of what Salapay Principat would be used for by the principals.
But of course, just one note, that of course is, we're doing that, the self-help, for this fiscal year, and whether it's still available, you know, in the next year is dependent on whether there's an authorization. So right. There's just that note.
Right, yeah, and I think one piece of the conversation that hasn't even entered the chat is the federal cuts and all of the federal support that's in jeopardy, you know, not just ongoing with the Trump administration, but the long-term goal that's been stated, dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. I mean, in that conversation, the thinking from the Republicans has always been, oh, well, they're going to dismantle U.S. DOE and then they're just going to give Guam a, you know, 5 mountains of cash to figure out how to use themselves, and I don't even think that's the problem. We've seen the funds being clawed back. We've seen projects that, you know, should be covered by COVID funding. They're denying it. You know, they've made very clear their intent to claw these funds back to the states as much as they can. So that's also a big part of it, is you're facing that federal cliff like a lot of the other agencies are. You know, and so I again just don't think it's prudent to take that $40 million of funding off the table when we have the Guam Department of Education in here saying that passing this budget as is will be disastrous for the department and Guam as a whole. The impacts of the proposed budget would require layoffs within the department, reduce work weeks or work days, forcing reduced services. How will this impact the classroom education that my colleagues seem to be concerned about on the one side, because on the other side, they're delivering you a fatally flawed budget proposal?
So, you know, that's, you know, one of the things, right, just to talk about, of course, you know, firstly, the federal, you know, funds. We're luckily at this point in time, you know, this is not a wood table, but I'm knocking on it anyways, that we've at least been told we're authorized the full $35 million for the consolidated grant for this fiscal year. Now, of course, that's subject to change at any point in time. You know, the U.S. DOE, the federal side, you know, the president could put out a directive and say, you know what, I don't feel like it today. we're rescinding that. The federal grant's canceled now.
Yeah, and that's kind of been what's happening is you have an agency, they come in today and they're like, oh, we're good, and then they find out, oh, next fiscal year we're getting zeroed out.
Right, exactly, and that's the next thing is there's no guarantee of future funding. When we move over to the local side, a lot of the cuts that we'll have to make here, I mean, again, I mean, we're talking about, of course, the self-help fund, that's a big example. Network switches, the integrity of our entire school internet network, to be able to provide technology options, and learning opportunities to our students. This is jeopardizing the ability for the department to even maintain the system. The switches, they were installed back in 2012. That's already 13 years. We've spoken with our data processing manager, who's the head of our IT division. We've spoken to her how many times in the past week, just calling her back into the office. Tish, is there a way we could cannibalize, if, let's say we were able to close 10 more schools, could we cannibalize all the old switches in all of the closed schools and try and maintain the network if we can't fund this? We've been trying to brainstorm how could we meet this demand, and every time I bring it over to his office, to Wade's office, I say, is it okay if I could, do you think I can cut this if I have to meet it?
And that's what's frustrating about this entire process is we've decided as a body collectively that we want to let the biggest of the big corporations eat. And when it comes to our public schools, we're coming in here and, expecting you to starve. Let's talk about some of these, the big cuts here. $10 million, all unfilled vacancies and proposed new positions, CBA or otherwise, excluding facilities and maintenance and already other filled positions. And then also having to cut $7.7 million for all substitute teacher positions. There's a lot of talk about the classroom education, but here we are. And if we have to cut this because we're shortchanging you, kids are going to end up sitting in the cafeteria because they don't have a substitute teacher. It's already happening, but we should enable you and empower you with the funds to remedy this situation, not make it worse. While one sector of our island is going to be, doing pretty well, public schools are going to be suffering.
Yeah, regarding the substitute teachers, we're currently funding that part of the budget at one substitute per school.
Right.
And if that one substitute per school is occupying a classroom, then a school aide or
yes,
somebody else is watching those students. And I saw this firsthand at Southern, where students were moved into the cafeteria and only school aides were watching them.
And that's not ideal.
And that's
it's
not
adequate.
ideal.
It's not a situation anybody
So with
wants.
the proposed budget, we're trying to bring it up to 4 substitutes per school, which is about 10% of the absentee. Whenever a school is in session, you have about 10% of the teachers missing, and that would meet the requirement. Maybe the best idea is we go now to 2 substitutes, but cutting us with the budget that's being proposed, it's not enough. We'll be back to 1 substitute per school.
Yeah, and this situation is only further exacerbated, made worse because we're also facing a shortage in the school aid. So when you have a teacher who's out, you don't have a substitute teacher, the last backstop's the school aid, and then if that's not there, they're going in the cafeteria.
Which means they're not out in the hallway supervising,
yes,
and they're not doing their actual job duties.
It's a chain reaction, in other words. And what we're doing with this proposal of $266 million is basically we're telling you guys to move the furniture around on the Titanic. We're not investing in our kids, despite what we hear every election. And this thought that, you've got $25 million in lapses, it sounds to me like that's all spoken for. It sounds like you're planning to spend that money on stuff that you need, stuff that's going to benefit the kids in the classroom.
That's the intent, sir, Senator. It's like, and of course, I appreciate that, the finance chair, recognizes that there are all of these other projects that, maybe we, have to go and approach the body in a separate legislation to try and, get the funding secured an alternative way. Really for us, our job is really to provide this education service and the support to the students. Whichever way the body decides we need to do this to, get the funding where it needs to be, we're going to, have to do that. And, the only thing that we ask is that, we look at the true bill of sales and say, how much are you saying you're paying for personnel? 200 some million. Okay, let's look. Do we want to sit down and discuss, do you really need this many staff in this certain position? If we have to do a line item, look over the budget, I'm sure that that's something that we are happy to do because, again, when this budget was created, back in March, we said it's a bare bones budget at 306. The only thing that changed for the 317 was just for me to go in and say, we kind of left that special fund. We shouldn't have touched that. I've shored it up. It's now at the appropriate appropriation level for what it's intended to do. And that's all that's really changed. The asks have not changed. We haven't added new line items into the budget request. It's still a bare bones budget, but we're just showing that this is the real fiscal year costs of the department to operate. This is the real cost of custodial services. It's the real cost of grounds maintenance. It's the real cost of all these different items, and all of these are integral to the operations of the department. I mean, if we want to say, yeah, no, we're not going to give Salapi Principat, but the department will have to ensure that it provides services, that type of supplies and materials to the schools. I'm sure that somewhere in here we could try to, get some money here set aside here from a lapse, but that's the challenge. It's, I'd have to go then and throughout the next fiscal year try and see, okay, how much money did I save on payroll that we were budgeted for? Let me move how many, maybe a $500,000 for this pay period. I can move that now.
It's frustrating to hear all this talk about, cutting corners and having to, ultimately the kids are the ones that are getting shortchanged because we're changing you. And a lot of those things where you talk about looking at positions and looking at efficiency, those things are being addressed via this audit because, let's be honest, GDOE, yeah, you have credibility issues and you might not be the best people to look in the mirror and say, okay, here's how we should do this. And that's why we passed that law to implement that audit so we can get like an outside perspective, a third-party perspective on where we can make meaningful reductions and increase efficiencies. And that should be the process, not cutting off your head with a $266 million budget and then asking you to tell us how you're going to cut more. Can we talk about the school lunch? Restoring the school lunch reimbursement. In your testimony, Mr. Swanson, you talk about the proposed cuts, of which there are many, and they constitute $29.6 million in total cuts. But you have mandatory spends that you have to do to maintain basic operations separate from your proposed $306 million budget request, to include $7.7 million restoring the school lunch reimbursement fund to its correct level of $12.5 million.
Senator, I'll go ahead and respond to that one specifically because that was, it was really, and I want to be fully upfront with the body, that really generated from our goal to try and get the budget down to, a level that, both us and, the board felt that we could get at least through to the legislature. The reason why it has to be set back up at 12.5 is because this fund, as the name implies, it's a reimbursement fund. It's not actual dollars that are appropriated from the collections of the revenues, per se. It's really reimbursements that we're getting back from USDA to GDOE. Prior to the establishment of the fund, something weird was going on where the department was receiving the reimbursements, which is truly local money, and at the time they were just deciding what to spend it on. So the establishment of the Child Nutrition Reimbursement Fund allows GDOE to take all the reimbursement funds and then turn around and directly spend that on food service contracts and services. So the correction there is really just to bring it back up to a level where it's actually more aligned with what the reimbursements look like. You know, the food services division within GDOE, because it's a federal grant from USDA that they're working on, they actually provide services to other participating schools outside of GDOE as well. So the reimbursement fund is really, it's what funds our ability to provide food to the school kids. Separate from that, there are other appropriations. So the 4.8 that you see there, the idea behind the 4.8 in the original $306 million proposal was that this is really GDOE's local share of what it costs for us to pay for Sodexo. So the idea was that, okay, we're going to try to reduce the ask to at least, you know, bring it down to what, you know, it actually costs us in terms of the local dollars. But when you look at the full fiscal year and, you know, the actual cost of the contract for the full fiscal year, so, you know, not to get into the weeds, there's a whole backstory to that. It would actually be $6 million for GDOE's local share of the Sodexo contract. That's why the ask for, if you look further down, there was food service management contract local share. It was 1.6. That was actually corrected back up to 6 million. And this is all about just making sure that we are truly asking the body, you know, to look at this is the actual full year cost. It's not, you know, some shorter version of what we can try to work with and, you know, move the money around in kind of situation.
You know, there was a little talk about the executive budget request compared to what the committee has presented, and golf, I think was the word used, of some $10 million. And a large chunk of that golf is made up of $8.5 million for maintenance that the governor included in her executive budget request. And it looks like they macheteed that out. And, you know, last fiscal year was the first time we were able to appropriate funds specifically for the maintenance of schools, which, you know, addressed a major concern with the colleagues. I mean, we're in here flipping over backwards talking about decades of neglect and maintenance. And so it's very fortunate for us to be able to support the schools with money to be used for that. So this $8.5 million being macheteed out of the executive budget request, let's talk about the impact of that, because I think that might be one of the most significant impacts for the department moving forward as we're doing these renovations, these refurbishments, and this stuff's gonna have to get maintained, or else we're gonna be right in the same situation that we were trying to crawl out of. Mr. Pangilinan, maybe? To anybody?
I can speak a little bit about that, Senator. Some of the money you gave us for maintenance last year, of course, with we briefed the legislature, we intended to hire more maintenance personnel. So that's some of our added cost in the payroll piece. We went from, how many do we have on board now? Actual 94. So we went from 47 total, including the supervisors and Jimmy's, to 94 personnel. So, and again, when it comes to actual wrench turners, that's only about 2 per campus.
That's a lot more than we had previously.
A lot more than we had previously, which was about 1 per campus.
What I appreciated about the governor's executive budget request was that it was an agreement. We funded maintenance of GDOE schools, and then the subsequent request, she also had put in the $8.5 million in her request. So to see it stripped away, it doesn't make sense to me that, you know, out of one side of our mouth we're talking about we can't neglect these facilities, but at the other side of our mouth we've chopped that part out of this request.
And I think the one thing that we also just need to, you know, also bring up is, you know, if you even look at the supplemental funds that you're referring to, you know, you can see that there is going to be a lapse of those funds. You know, there were procurements that we have been trying to get through for how many months that just we were not able to accomplish. And that was tools and equipment, supplies to help support our brand spanking new teams. And so, you know, the administrative challenges are serious. They're, you know, I don't hold punches with, I'm telling you, it's grave. The inability of the department to get these things through. And we need the additional support to help get these things through.
Yeah, and I think that, we tried to get the additional support from the administration via the fencing procurement and the mold mitigation, and you kind of know how that turned out. And so, Mr. Bukakosa, in your comments, you had said that GDOE doesn't have a chief procurement officer. I think you said something like you have a couple buyer twos.
Oh, yes. So he was deputy was referring to the staffing at the procurement office.
Yeah, we have an assistant chief. Well, she's actually the procurement and warehouse administrator. And then below her is one buyer supervisor 2. And then we have one buyer 2. We just hired another one. But especially in the buyer 2 section where they're certified to handle the greater than $500,000 contracts, we do need to hire at least 2 or 3 more to handle the volume of work, both federal and local, the volume of contracts that we're trying to push through.
And to talk about right sizing the services there. We do actually have, if I recall correctly, it's 4 buyer 1s, but they're split between federal and local, and so they're really there to assist with smaller procurements, like Deputy said. But the problem, of course, is that when they're federally funded, it's difficult to justify to continue paying them when they're working mostly on local procurements. If they run out of work, of all federal work, then there's a possibility for us to request for approval for them to do local tasks outside of their federal. But once there's federal work available, their priority job is to do federal contracts. And of course, as you're all aware, multiple millions of dollars in federal grants that still need to be spent as well. So, having them on staff, our procurement office staffing numbers, if you print the staffing pattern, shows, hey, you guys got like however many people, you guys should be okay. But, there are still restrictions and limitations.
Right, yeah, and I think that's important to note is that, and thank you for that insight, is there's different streams that require different levels of staffing. But is there anything that prevents you via the hiring freeze? Are these positions exempt from that freeze? And have you attempted to recruit just a general chief procurement officer?
Again, the focus is on filling the requirements at the schools. Yeah, that's the number 1 priority, and we do get through with proper approval. Special cases.
Right, yeah, so you have to implore, because the board meeting I watched, the chair had said that he would unilaterally approve any special requests for hiring, which I thought was a little interesting. But have you pled the case to the chairman of the Board of Education that, we're going to the legislature and we're getting reamed in here because of these obligated lapses, and we admittedly have a problem spending these funds, but when you come in here and the narrative is like that, it just makes it harder for me to get the support to give you the resources, not that you want, but that you absolutely need. So we need to plead that case with the chair and say, hey, I know we're focused on the classroom, but this traffic jam in the procurement is impacting greatly the services that we're trying to deliver to the classroom. And then the second question, this budget, I don't think it allows you to even do that. I mean, if you can't hire the CBA positions.
Yeah, Mr. Sablon, the chair, has been very supportive of recent requests we have put in. The buyer 2 that we have, not on board yet, but hired, that he approved that. We just requested to hire 3 people in our IT department, and he's approved that. So I don't want to put the chair in a position.
Oh no, I'm not trying to. I'm just saying, hey, that's the issue. You should take it to the chair. And, Jordan.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought for 1 second. I'm the thing that we do want to at least put forth is we understand that it's not just about hiring more people. We have monthly meetings with the finance committee within the board, and we discussed there are policies within the department that need to change in terms of efficiency, and it will help us decrease the volume of procurement actions. There are things that we can do to try and simplify the process and make it easier so that we aren't having so much difficulty, but that's not going to be the only solution. We're still going to need the staffing to get through these things. So at the very least, we're attacking it from both sides. It's not just a matter of us coming up and saying, oh, we need more people. There's no way for us to do this with, however many, but really, it's both sides, and we're working on both sides. We're trying to get this accomplished.
Yeah, and that's why it's frustrating that we're talking about this shortchanging of the public school students and this narrative that, you've got these lapses, and so we're not going to entertain any additional funding. So, like I said, I have an amendment here that would appropriate $10 million to the department to deal specifically with cuts and programs that are in jeopardy because of budget shortfalls and impending federal cuts. Superintendent Swanson, is this something that you believe is absolutely critical for your department to receive in order to avoid this budget bill, which you have said is disastrous for the department, for the island, for our public school students, their families, and stakeholders?
Based on my experience with the 266 that we had this last year, and given the increased cost of operation, I think it is essential at the same time to understand the complexities of it. We need to have the support. We're still in and we are in fact realigning operations. I'm looking forward to the audit results, and we're also on a couple of positions to include the procurement office. Is doing a desk audit to say, do we have the right kind of person, the right kind of qualifications, because we can do a better job. So, but yeah, when Jordan went through and redid the actuals on what we submitted, we can see the increased cost, and that's just a fact that's there. I also know that we have limits in the ability of the local economy to generate any kind of support for any organization, so we're going to be doing our part for sure. But we have to think about it.
Thank you to my colleague for yielding the time. I have a lot of questions for the second round, and just seconds waning here, so I want to ask for an update on the refurbishment and the scheme with the ARP reimbursements and the pot of money that you have and how we're moving forward with that.
Yeah, we have been, on June 28th, the U.S. Secretary of Education approved or reinstated our March 2026 late liquidation deadline. So we can afford to, scrounging up money or funds that we have, we can afford to pay about $11 million out of our local fund. So far, we've done 3 rotations that have been approved, and we've paid the bills. Of course, we clear everything through internal audit first. We pay the bills. We submit the request to USED, and it's been a quick turnaround from USED. Yeah, the last one was just a couple of days ago. Was less than 12 hours. We had a response that our request for reimbursement was approved. So it's been good. We think we'll be caught up with all the ARP bills within the next 2 cycles. I'm calling these cycles. We're now on cycle 3. And I think by the time we get to cycle 5, we'll be caught up. But then, of course, we'll be paying current bills, primarily the refurbishment projects, all the way until December, January.
If we may, Senator.
Mr. Chair, can I just complete the answer?
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll wait for the answers.
We can give you an update. As of August 8th, this is the accomplishment that we have: the crock spa and roof coating, 12 schools completed. Canopy installations and repair demolition ongoing at GW. All schools except Chamonix and VMS steel post and framing to commence September 2025. roof cladding, gutter, and flushing to commence October 2025. Restrooms, fixtures replacement, multi-restrooms, completed 18 units out of 20 units at Aguila. So ongoing 2 units, completed 34 units out of 34, ongoing 6 units out of 23, ongoing 6 units out of 17 at OMS, ongoing 6 units out of 6 units at Finigayan. Single restrooms, completed 2 units out of 2 at Aguila again, completed 19 units out of 19 OCPS, completed 8 units out of 10 units at JQ, completed 10 units out of 18 at CLT, completed 40 units out of 56 at FIN, and ongoing 11 units out of 56 units. Nick can update you on the electrical upgrade.
Want me to continue?
Yes.
Give me this one. Nick Cruz, Capital Improvement Projects. So as you guys know, I lost the summer due to the pause, right? USAID kind of took them, yeah. So my priority during the summer was to do restroom renovations and exterior door replacements. We just recently got the project started up again because USAID changed their mind. And now we are working and prioritizing on restroom renovations and exterior door replacements. It's a little bit of a headache for me. I have to work with the principals, work around the students, especially the elementary students. We have to cordon off areas. Classrooms have to move, especially if you're doing exterior door replacements. If I'm doing a restroom renovation, I have to ensure that the class or the facility is within the ratio of urinals, toilets, and sinks for public health compliance, right? So it's a headache. Luckily, Cortec is making my life a little bit more easier. As far as FBOG, they were sort of in the same situation. We haven't paid FBOG since, I don't even know, February, until finally we caught up with their payment of around $2 million. That greatly impacted the project because the vendor was unable to release any of their purchase orders to get supplies and materials such as exterior doors, which I wanted to do a mock-up during the summer for FBOG. But the target date is now moved to March 2026. The vendor knows this, and that's the drop-dead deadline because we need to expend all of this funding for the GDOE refurbishment of 12 schools and FBOG by that deadline. So our office is really busy, yeah.
Sidus Masi, it's glad to see the work continues. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Sidus Masi, and we'll be happy to be receiving BBMR this afternoon to explain the gulf between the 306 million and the 276 that they actually put in because of the reserve account. So we'll be looking forward to that. And the Republican philosophy is exactly what got us all of these leaseback schools under the Camacho Moylan administration to include the current procurement going forward for Simon Sanchez. Viva Republicans. We are in recess until 2:15.